What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to discuss today with Invest 97L as it's making its potential approach towards the Cabo Verde Islands, and then it's going to start turning towards the due west and head potentially towards the Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles, and potentially the United States afterward. So we have a lot to discuss with you guys for today, a lot of models to show as well. But before we get into that, thank you so much for tuning into the stream last night. It meant so much that you guys were there, and it was, to be honest, the stream of my life last night, and I could not be more thankful for you guys showing up and doing all of that for me. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it right here. So starting off, we have 96 and 97L designated by the NHC. We now have our red area of interest right here for 97L. So we'll go ahead and mainly talk about this, primarily because this is the dominant threat, and I don't think 96L is going to really do that much anyway. So here we go. This is actually updated as of about 30 minutes ago. Recently received satellite-derived wind data indicate that a well-defined low-pressure system has formed about midway between the west coast of Africa and Cabo Verde Islands, with maximum winds around 35 miles per hour. Although the additional shower and thunderstorm activity still lacks organization, only a small increase in organization could lead to the formation of a tropical depression before the low moves near or across the Cabo Verde Islands tonight and on Monday. Regardless of development, locally heavy rainfall and gusty winds are possible today and Monday across the Cabo Verde Islands, and interests there should monitor the progress of the system. Even if a tropical depression does not form over the next day or so, environmental conditions appear conducive for later development, and a tropical depression is likely to form by the middle to later parts of this week while moving west-northwestward at about 15 to 20 miles per hour across the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. 40% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 80% chance in the next 7 days. So that's kind of your situation that you have right here. They've only been increasing the chances more and more and more. Last night at around 7 p.m. it was at 60%, then they upped it to 70%, now it's at 80%. I wonder if we're going to see a 90 by 2 o'clock Eastern this time. We'll have to see how that pans out, but ultimately this system is only showing more and more signs of organization right here, and this has actually been kind of ahead of schedule in terms of its development. We were originally thinking, okay, we're not sure if it's going to develop before it gets to the Cabo Verde Islands. It's probably going to wait a few days before it does that, but now we're thinking, okay, this has a shot, and if it doesn't do it, then we still have that long-term development on the table. So that's something the NHC is taking into account right here, and that's something we're absolutely going to have to pay attention to because that might be an indicator for what happens in the long run. So looking at satellite imagery, now we're actually going to be using the DAPIA website first and then going over the tropical tidbits because we finally have stuff for DAPIA right here. We can finally use this and kind of give our own analysis on this. So it's not as impressive as we were seeing on stream last night, I will say that. Seizure warning for those of you prone to flashing lights, but you still have quite a bit of convection, especially compared to this time yesterday. So that is something you're going to want to pay attention to as well, and we'll also show you that as soon as this gets loaded right here. But as you can see right here, definitely a lot more impressive last night. This was around 1:50 Central Time last night. Definitely a lot more impressive as it was going through DMAX, but as you start to see a diurnal minimum start to kick in and you start to see that DMAX decrease, then you kind of have the situation right here where you kind of start seeing a lot of this convection starting to weaken right here as it approaches the Cabo Verde Islands. So that's something you need to keep in mind. But ultimately, still a very healthy tropical wave. It's still quite robust, and it's still quite large as well. And it definitely looks like it's starting to tighten up in terms of circulation as well. So that is something you're also going to want to take into account. Because as the system starts to organize and develop, especially as it gets towards the main development region, that kind of opens the table for potentially big intensification down the road. So we're going to have to pay attention to that going forward. But here's what we have with the current storm data with 97L. So what we have for you right here, its current location is 14 degrees north, 20.1 degrees west. So it is kind of approaching the Cabo Verde Islands at this current point, where depending on when it turns will be very critical, because if it turns like over the Verde Islands or just to the south, that could potentially pose a bigger risk to land. Maximum sustained winds are at 30 knots, as in the NHC advisory. That's 35 miles per hour. And then you have your minimum central pressure at 1,006 millibars. It's not really that has changed, but it's mainly been the wind speeds that have increased, as well as the amount of convection that has blown up all across that. You have the radius of maximum winds at 60 nautical miles right here, so a pretty large system we are looking at this current point. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. We have the latest track and intensity guidance, at least according to what we have here. I believe we have. I'm not sure if we have the 12Z guidance, but we do have this 6Z we can kind of go over, because I'm recording this earlier this morning, so I do apologize for that. Here's your track models that we have pulled up for right here. And just for comparison, I want to go ahead and take a look at the 0Z as well. Here's what we had at 0Z. The track model guidance, majority of them had them kind of moving towards the west around, I'd say 17, 18 degrees north in latitude, and then starting to move to the west-northwest right here, and mainly staying north of the Lesser Antilles and potentially south of Bermuda over here. So that's something that we're going to watch. We were talking about on stream last night. These kinds of tracks would favor a bit more of a recurving pattern down the road, where potentially this stays out to sea. But looking at the 6Z runs, what's the difference right here? Boom. Quite a bit of a difference, actually, because as you can see, it's a lot more concentrated, number one. Number two, it kind of shifts a little bit to the, at least the guidance in general, shifts a little bit further up to the north as well, although we are seeing a few more models kind of shifting further to the south, potentially towards the Lesser Antilles. And for those of you watching from the Leeward Islands, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this, because this could cause some pretty significant impacts if those southern models hold. So we'll have to pay attention for you guys over there. That's your intensity guidance that we have pulled up for you. Not your intensity guidance, your track guidance that we have for 6Z. Intensity guidance, man, oh man, this is interesting. As you can see right here, intensity guidance, the majority of the models want this to go up to Category 2 strength. The HAFS B wants this to get up to potentially Category 4. The HWRF wants this at Cat 3. You're definitely going to want to pay attention to this, but what I will say is the big takeaway that you're going to want to take from this is the longer this takes to organize and develop, the bigger the threat this poses to land, because if we start seeing this spin up and develop right away, like it is over the Cabo Verde Islands, then you're going to have a situation where the system could strengthen a lot quicker and a lot faster down the road, and potentially get yanked out to sea. Whereas if it takes its time and it organizes rather slowly and potentially kind of waits a few days until potentially getting to around 50-ish degrees west for it to develop and strengthen, then that poses a greater threat to the Bahamas, the Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles, and the United States. So that is something that you're going to want to keep in mind going forward with this. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and show you some model runs as well. I apologize. I'll go ahead and show you this over here. I'll go ahead and move my screen, show you that, just to show you the guidance right here. But that's kind of your situation that we have, and we'll go ahead now and show you some model runs, both operational and hurricane runs, because we need to go over all of this so that way we can give you an idea of what may be potentially happening. So this is what we got for you right here. Let me go ahead and move to the modeling for you guys right here. Let's go ahead and shift over to the North Atlantic, and we'll start with the European. Then we'll get to the GFS, and then the rest of the operational runs very quickly. We have the 0Z European out right here. Systems kind of takes its time to organize and develop. I would say it kind of starts to move a bit more to the southwest right here, although the European does actually have this as an open wave all the way until it gets to about 60 degrees north, when it starts to close its isobars and it starts to develop right here. But then it kind of starts to get yanked by this trough as it starts to organize and develop and strengthen right here. So we'll have to pay attention to see how that pans out. Honestly, there are a few issues I have with the European run, partly the initialization of it. I do kind of just I am a little curious to see kind of, first of all, I don't really see this system moving north of the Cabo Verde Islands. If they're going to be moving, they're likely at this point either going to move through the islands or they're going to move a little bit to the south, because the initialization, at least at this point, has consistently been a bit further to the south and a bit further to the west than the model runs. That's obviously to varying degrees, but they favor a more, this is going through the islands instead of going north of the islands right here, at least according to what I've seen from real-time data. So that's the first thing I have, and that's kind of that's kind of screwed up the track a little bit. I do kind of like the intensity of this, I will say. I do like that they keep this relatively weak until it gets further to the west. That's kind of what I've been thinking for a while, unless this completely just blows out of the top and this gets designated a tropical depression. It just needs a little bit more organization for it to do that. But that's your situation that we have with the Europeans. A 0Z run, compared to that to the 6Z right here. 6Z, similar situation right here, although it does go a bit further to the south, and it is a bit stronger as well. It actually gets up to potentially hurricane strength around 45 degrees west over here, as it's kind of around 20 degrees north. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. And then you have a ridge that's kind of building up over here. I'll go ahead and show you the 500 millibar height anomalies right here. Yeah, you have a ridge that's starting to build up over here in this part of Canada right here. And as long as this trough stays relatively weak and stays north of this big ridge right here, this system is more favored to move further to the west. Let's go ahead and compare that to the 0Z right here. Yeah, there was a significantly stronger trough over here, and there was definitely a weaker ridge right here. The 6Z run rebuilds the ridge quite a bit, actually, moving forward. So that's something you're going to want to keep in mind. This is basic synoptics at this current point. And I will say, we have seen some fluctuations in intensity of the ridge, but ultimately you have the 6Z guidance that has shifted a bit further to the south compared to the 0Z guidance, so that's something to pay attention to, and all of them take into account a potentially stronger ridge, so you're going to want to keep that in mind. Now we'll go ahead and show you the AI run. We'll show you the 0Z and the 6Z, but we have to be kind of quick with this because I want to get to the hurricane runs. But the AI 0Z run has the system starting to slowly organize and develop as it kind of approaches the Lesser Antilles, and then as it moves north of the Dominican Republic, it starts to really turn up and intensify. The AI run actually does have this potentially impacting the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, and then moving into the Gulf region. I will say I'm a little hesitant to say, okay, this is going to be moving into the Gulf from the Atlantic Basin. There's a lot of things that need to go right for this to happen, particularly the steering currents. I just don't see it at this current point. I will say, though, I do think that the Antilles and the Bahamas need to pay attention still, regardless of the development and regardless of at least the initial track. But looking at the 6Z, let's go ahead and show you that 6Z has the system moving due west potentially, and then just moves north of the Lesser Antilles, and then kind of starts to head further to the west, and then you have this ridge starting to build back up again, and then you have the 6Z AI run potentially making having a situation where the system kind of just moves parallel to the east coast of the United States, makes landfall in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and then really impacts the Mid-Atlantic and the New England and then Canada right here. That is something you're going to want to pay attention to. Now, granted, by the time this starts, we're about 10 days out or so, so please do keep it with that in mind and take it with a grain of salt. We'll just keep you updated on the Pat's Path Predictor channel and leave it at that. Next thing I'll show you is the GFS run. Here's what we have with the 6Z GFS right here. Systems organizing, developing, and then it's kind of starting to move due west. The GFS has this strengthening to potentially hurricane strength east of the 60-degree west line right here. There is this trough over Canada that does start to organize, and it starts to yank the system further up to the north and potentially out to sea, but we'll have to pay attention and see how this pans out. And then you go ahead and look at the Canadian run. We have the 0Z Canadian going right here. So systems organizing and developing. The Canadian, interestingly, does have a bit of a ridge building in, but then there's this trough over here before this ridge starts to build back up. The Canadian, interestingly, based on what I'm seeing, let's look at the 500 millibar height anomalies. Kind of has this moving west, then moving to the north, and given this substantial ridge pattern, kind of gets yanked back further to the west and potentially towards the Carolinas right there. So that's something to keep in mind, is something to pay attention to, because that is definitely a possibility at this current point. Lastly, we'll check the icon run. 0Z icon goes the furthest out. Icon has the system moving further to the west, and then kind of it's kind of slow to organize and develop, but then it starts to get its act together, potentially category 3 strength by the time we get to 7+ days out. So that's something you're going to want to watch, because I do think a major hurricane is very much possible with this system right here, even though it's only an invest, mainly because the conditions are so ripe for development. And they're going to be so good once the system heads towards the southwestern Atlantic. We'll have to pay attention to that. Then we'll go ahead and show you the hurricane runs. We'll start with the H-Wharf, then go to the H-Mon, then the HAFS A runs. And we'll use main sea level pressure and 10-meter winds for this. So here's what we have for Here's what we have for the H-Wharf. Right here, systems organizing, moving through the Cabo Verde Islands, and then starting to potentially organize at around 17 to 18 degrees north. The H-Wharf does have the system intensifying pretty quickly, actually, getting up to hurricane strength around 4-ish days out, and then starting to really ramp up from here, getting up to potentially major hurricane strength by the time we get to 5 days out. And the system's moving generally west-northwestward, so you're going to want to pay attention to that intensity. Looking at the HMON now, let's go ahead and take a quick gander at this. The HMON is pretty interesting. It's definitely on the more conservative side of things. HMON kind of moves to about, I'd say, 19 degrees north or so, and kind of hovers around that line, and it actually doesn't really develop that much. It actually takes its time to organize and strengthen to tropical storm strength, so that's definitely a bit of an outlier compared to some of the models that I have seen. Next thing we'll show you is the HAFS A model from 97L. We'll go ahead and take a quick gander at this. The HAFS A run has the system organizing, moving through the Cabo Verde Islands, and then kind of moving due west at this current point, strengthening up to potentially hurricane strength in the next 3 to 4 days. At this point, potentially Category 2 intensity by 5 days, and then Category 3 intensity after that. So you're definitely going to want to keep a very close eye on that. Look at this, 958 millibar pressure on this system. I want to take a quick look at this. Yeah, it's definitely a lot, pretty consolidated. It's definitely organizing quite a bit right here, according to the HAFS A. So you're definitely going to want to watch that because of how consolidated and how quickly the system starts to organize. Right here, we can go ahead and go back and show this. Yeah, you're at 995 millibars, and then it starts to really band, really starts to organize, and pretty much strengthen right off the bat right here once it does that. So that's your HAFS A run. Let's go ahead and switch back to this, and then we'll go to the HAFS B right here. Let's go ahead and go to let's go ahead and go back to 0 hours. The HAFS B has definitely been the most aggressive model out of the suite right here. It has the system kind of moving through the Cabo Verdes as a 1,001, 1,003 millibar system. I will say, I think if it does get any stronger, it's likely going to stay tropical depression strength and just stay at that. I don't think we're going to see a tropical storm in the Cabo Verdes at this current point. That's just my opinion based on what we're seeing. And then you have the system organizing and strengthening up to hurricane strength in the next 3 days. You're going to want to watch that. And then major hurricane strength in the next 4 days. This is around 125 miles per hour. The pressure is 959 millibars. It bottoms out again to 949. That's potentially Category 4 intensity right there, according to the HAFS B. The HAFS B has definitely been the most aggressive model out of the suite that we have right here. So this is stuff we're going to have to pay attention to moving forward, and we'll continue to keep you updated on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. We will have another stream tonight. It'll be a little bit later, around 9:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 Central Time, so please keep that in mind. I'll pull out the stream and a little later. But with that being said, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. We got a lot of new members last night at Storms United, so if you would like to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that, as always, will be in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.